Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who's enrolled in the Herbalism PTSD and Traumatic Stress course. It really means everything to me. I think I get so anxious beforehand that no one's going to join and then I'm always just blown away by people's emails and people's support for the course and people get in touch who've done it before and say how helpful it's been and things. So I'm so grateful. I don't know if you can hear my snoring dog. We've got a rescued French bulldog called Beau, who maybe some of you have seen in my Instagram stories. And he gets quite jealous of the baby. He's doing really well, he's adapting really well. But my partner and his mum have taken the baby out so I can work. And so I've got a little bit of time with Beau on the sofa recording podcasts. But he is a loud snorer. So I'm really sorry if you can hear him. I could kick him out, but I feel bad. So anyway, okay. So in this episode, I wanted to talk about learning herbalism because it is a question I get all the time is, where did you study? Where did you train? How do you know so much about plants? Which always makes me laugh because I think wherever you are in your sort of field, so to speak, as a metaphor seems funny for a herbalist, but you know what I mean? You always feel like you don't know enough. And with herbalism, there's just so much to learn, constantly. It's just unrelenting, which is the best part of herbalism is that you're just learning all the time. So yeah, I just want to give the disclaimer before I jump in that it's such a long learning journey. And I'm going to be talking about some of the different sort of approaches that I've kind of utilized in my life to learn about herbalism and where they've taken me and their strengths and advantages. But yeah, I just want to emphasize that it's not one or the other, right? It's all of it mashed together. Okay. But anyway, so my biggest lessons in learning herbalism, I guess number one for me is intimacy with plants. So a lot of you will know my story that I started doing distance learning courses in herbalism in prison. And that was because I was surrounded by plants in the prison courtyards, not surrounded by plants. It wasn't some gorgeous botanical garden or something, but I was surrounded in the sense that I worked in the prison gardens and they were just shitty little concrete courtyards with some beds and a massive concrete area and a big lawn of grass, but they were my plants. Does that make sense? And I mean intimacy in the sense that I saw those same plants every single day. I mean, not every day, we would get rotated around the house blocks to manage the land. Sorry, I'm using a weird metaphors today, not manage the land, but we would get rotated around different house blocks to cut the grass and quote unquote weed the beds. But for me, it was the intimacy, the seeing the same plants every day, seeing them month after month, seeing them when they're, curled up in the winter and it's just a root, seeing them in the summer when they're in full flower, seeing them when they've gone to seed, and it is that intimacy. And I remember getting reading some wild food blog, and they were talking about having a path where you walk every day so you can see those plants, whether that's, on your way to work or college or whatever. It's something where you're going regularly and you can witness the changes. I know other people call it a kind of sit spot, a place where you go where you can literally just observe. So you can sit somewhere outside and just, journal on what you're seeing. Are you seeing plants? What kinds of plants are they? Are you seeing birds, insects? What's the weather? What's the temperature? What are the winds like? All of this is about intimacy, right? And I guess I'm speaking this to people who are maybe not necessarily just in England and Wales, because I know loads of people listen to this, but people who are divorced from the land in terms of colonialism and the fact that it's been generations of people, displaced from land to, feed the Industrial Revolution and whatever, and that most people in my generation know like absolutely nothing about plants. We know more corporate logos than we can barely name like 5 plants. Does that make sense? So it's like, I just want to acknowledge that like that is the starting place for most people. Like that is the starting place for me. I know some people will have, will be Indigenous and have, just this like amazing embodied intimacy with the land and huge like plant knowledge passed through generations. And yeah, I just think like a lot of people in this kind of like capitalist culture like don't have that plant knowledge. So we are like kind of starting from scratch, and it really does feel like learning a whole new language, Like when I first learned herbalism, like I just thought there was no way I would ever get it, like in the sense of there was like a million plant names and they were all in Latin, and I'm like dyslexic, and it's like really hard to like, understand what they're saying. And, it was like this family and this is the mint family and this is the rose family. And I just like couldn't see the similarities between these different plants. So I just want to soothe you that like, if that's where you are, then that is perfect. And like, that is an amazing starting point. And that's where I was too. Right. So yeah, like kind of, having that, back to basics kind of like intimacy with herbs, I think is a wonderful place to start. And like the Prisoner's Herbal book is like a really fantastic book in the sense that it just profiles like 10 plants really, really deeply. So it's not like get this herbal book and there's 300 herbs in there from all over the world and you've got to somehow know all of the recommendations and contraindications and all of this stuff. No, it's like, hey, these are like 10 plants that are like found in most corners of the planet. What are their properties? What are their qualities? What's their history? And yeah, just kind of starting from there. I did do an Instagram post once, which was like called like begin with one plant. And that's the approach I share in my Herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress courses, like having that one herb that you get to know really well, that you experiment with that plant, like in prison, for example, like dandelions were everywhere. So it was like, I got to know how they tasted, how the leaves tasted when they were young and crisp, how they tasted when they were like old and a bit minging, and I probably shouldn't have eaten them. How their flowers tasted, how their leaves tasted in hot water, how their leaves tasted in a tea that had been left overnight in a really strong infusion, and how that compared to like how their roots tasted. And, what do their roots taste like when they're fried in a stir fry? Like, it was not that I can make a stir fry in prison, but I just mean like, yeah, it's like really about not going like super wide really fast, but going like deep with a plant and then building that kind of like medicine cabinet up over time. So it's like, I've spent a few months working with dandelion and I know dandelion really well. Right now, hawthorn is in flower. I'm going to get to know hawthorn. I'm going to go sit by a hawthorn tree every day for like 2 weeks for like 5 minutes while I drink my cup of tea. And, I'm going to receive things from that tree. And I know this sounds like real left field hippie, but like, it is like, that's how plants communicate with us. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to start by saying like, yeah, one approach is just this kind of like go deep, start with one plant. And for me, like in prison, those restraints were kind of expansive in the sense that not being able to access the internet or loads of herb books or 500 tinctures at the Whole Food store, it was like actually that enabled that intimacy with those few plants. So, and if sticking to one plant feels really challenging, then maybe you work with 3, and you get to know 3 if you just like bouncing around different interests and things. Like, everyone's really different, but yeah, I'm just trying to say go intimate. Okay, and the next kind of approach, I guess, is kind of like DIY, like do it yourself, kind of follow your passion and your interest. So for example, when I got out of prison and I'd had some grants in prison to do some distance learning courses, I did actually want to do a herbal medicine degree, and unfortunately I didn't finish like A-levels at college because I left home when I was 16. So it would have meant like going to like formal kind of education again, which, you know, I'm not against. And also I was still like on license from prison. It was still, you know, there was like still a high risk that I would get recalled back to prison. And I actually contacted the National Institute of Medical Herbalists and explained my conviction. Hey, I went to prison for this animal liberation campaign. And yeah, and they were basically kind of like, you're not welcome. They wanted me to write a statement about my quote unquote crimes and that I promised to never bring herbalism into disrepute and that I showed kind of remorse. And I didn't even show remorse to the judge. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even like submit any paperwork during the sentencing or anything of like good character or anything. Like, I just was so like hardline militant, like, hey, like, I'm proud of taking direct action for animals and to stop, you know, thousands of animals being basically like tortured in this laboratory, and that, yeah, I'm not gonna show remorse even if that gives me a longer time in prison. So I'm definitely not gonna do that for a herbal medicine organization. So I couldn't access the kind of degree courses, and also maybe it was like a limiting belief, but like I really had this feeling of like, I don't feel like I can go to university. Like, I had a lot of kind of stuff going on of like, there's no way I could afford it. Like, how would I support myself? Like, and yeah, and I think maybe on reflection, I probably could have got like financial support from someone to do that and got loans and kind of do what all the other students do, right? But for some reason, I just felt like it wasn't for me. And I think I've had to like unlearn a lot of that stuff of like, actually, like, I am good enough and smart enough to be in these education spaces that always felt so alienating because of like class stuff. But that's like a whole other podcast. But I just want to say, like, again, that sort of restriction of like, hey, I can't just go and do this herbal medicine degree kind of like fired me up of like, okay, well, I'm just going to fucking educate myself then. Like, I'm just going to go for it. You know, I had like no money to my name. I was like signing on JSA, like having all these probation appointments, just like, yeah, it was, you know, a difficult period. I was also just sort of like hit with PTSD after prison and stuff. But again, like, it enabled like this kind of concept of like self-foraging, of like, you know, listening to everything under the sun, watching every YouTube video, reading all these articles, getting books out from the library. Like, I devoured like all of these kind of like free resources, if that makes sense. And I think, yeah, I think it's so hard, you know, like back then, I mean, Instagram probably existed, but I wasn't on it. But it was like, it felt like the volume of information we're exposed to now is like, you know, 50 times what it was then. But even then, there was like so much information online, and it was like wonderful to me that I could access that. And I'm so grateful for all the herbalists who are kind of content creators of sharing this knowledge for free. I think the challenges with that is that you don't get like the full picture. So you're getting little parts of things, right? Like, it's like walking into a forest and you learn about this plant and this tree and this soil type. You don't look at it like an ecosystem of, you know, how are the leaves falling from the trees, you know, feeding the biology in the soil, and that's like supporting the root health and blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't see that like systems perspective. You just sort of get the fruits, if that makes sense. You just get these little tidbits, and, you know, you can piece them together really well, and they're always useful. You know, like, I'm always drawing on like random little things I've read and picked up from various, you know, podcasts and things. But it's a very time consuming kind of, non-systematic, I guess, approach to learning herbalism. But I think it's a fantastic way to learn herbalism if, you know, you don't want to become like a quote unquote clinical herbalist. And, you know, I can dissect the hierarchy between home herbalists and community herbalists and clinical herbalists and all this bullshit. But really, like, if you don't want to kind of like have medical knowledge, but you just want to have plant knowledge so that you can make basic things for yourself, you can grow plants, you can get to know them, then I think this route is like really fantastic and is kind of accessible. yeah, I think it's very enlivening, and you can kind of like follow your curiosity and your passion in that moment. So it's like I develop a chest infection, so then I get really interested in antiviral herbs or herbs that help with coughs or different types of cough, like are they wet or dry or damp or whatever. And I think like that kind of just in time learning is really effective. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But yeah, I think, oh yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is like, if you know that the herbalist path isn't going to be your like big thing, in the sense of like, you say you already have some sort of, you know, vocation, or you're like super focused on a campaign, or you're a parent, you know, and a full-time stay-at-home mom or something, and it's like herbalism is just this like passion, but it's not like your main thing, then I think like I think you can like constantly just follow your curiosity of like doing your own thing and listening to podcasts in the background, or listening to podcasts when you're driving, or, you know, reading reels or Instagram posts or whatever from herbalists who are writing about plants. Like, I think that approach is like really wonderful and nourishing. And I think even if you don't want to be like a quote unquote herbalist, you can still be really strengthened and nourished by learning about herbalism. Does that make sense? Okay, so that was like thinking about kind of DIY learning in terms of like information. I also think it's like really, really important for any herbalist of any kind to be doing like practical things, right? Like experimentation and medicine making. Everyone is different. Like, I'm very much like rule breaker, kind of like, oh, I'll just try it like this and see if it works and document it and then try again. And like, I'm very kind of like self-directed, whereas I think a lot of people can be like more like they want instructions and they want to know they're doing it right, and that's important to them, right? Like, I've had partners that bake cakes who have to follow a recipe like very specifically, and I'm literally their worst nightmare because I'm just like, oh, just check it in. So but yeah, whichever like way that kind of suits you, I think like you should embrace that in terms of learning, but I think you always need to complement the book knowledge and the podcast and everything else with like practicality. So yeah, like find whatever works for you. Like, maybe that means hanging out with a more experienced person who's really into herbalism, and you can kind of like learn by like osmosis. Like, one of my best mates who likes to remain a bit of a like lurker, anonymous person, but like they would kind of come and hang out with me, and we would do like herbal things together, right? Like foraging and making glycerites and making ointments and making fireside vinegar and stuff. And then they sort of like became like increasingly confident with those things because they'd done them with me. I mean, they'd also done them on their own, but like other people, unless they'd done them with me, like for example, on a course, they wouldn't have known where to start, for example. Or they would have made a medicine and then been like, I don't know if this is like good quality enough, or have I done it right, kind of thing. So yeah, like I think some folks really need that like face-to-face stuff. And I think if I'd had kind of like more like money in my sort of 20s after I got out of prison, like I would have loved going on more like practical courses. You know, like the one I teach, the practical medicine making course that I teach, it's like 3 days long, and we cover like all the things like tinctures, glycerites, infused oils, ointments. And it's like, I would have loved something like that. Like, if I'd have had that when I first got out of prison, then it would have saved a lot of time of me experimenting, of like, okay, well, the internet says it needs this much soy wax, but actually this feels like shit, so I'm going to put in this ratio of it. Oh, okay, that works, right? I'll use that. You know, like if I'd have just learned from someone experienced, then that would have been faster. I mean, I'm not into like the whole capitalist, like, oh, we need to save time and be like super productive and everything is like a waste, you know, we have to be hyper efficient. Like, I'm not saying that, but I also think like we can kind of like collapse time a little bit, right? By learning from people that are experienced, and that's like really powerful. So yeah, in terms of learning herbalism and finding those opportunities, like maybe it means getting involved in like a project like Community Apothecary or Herbalist Without Borders Bristol, or you know, like some other like Herbalista, for example, in Ireland or the so-called US. It's like, you know, those being around people who know how to make medicine, who know a lot about plants, you're going to be like absorbing all that stuff by osmosis. But yeah, like I remember hanging out with a herbalist who came to Calais, who's a really wonderful herbalist, and they were saying that on their degree program, like they didn't do like any practical stuff, like they didn't have any confidence in medicine making, or even like plant identification stuff. They really struggled with, and they felt like a shit herbalist. And I was just like, damn, like you're an amazing herbalist. It's just a shit education. You know, let's like learn how to make this stuff. And then, you know, they learn how to make cough syrup and vinegar and all the things. So yeah, like I just think like to be a well-rounded herbalist, getting those medicine making skills and foraging skills and horticulture type skills are really, really important. I know not everyone has access to land, like, you know, with the privilege that I do in terms of my stepdad owning this small holding and stuff that I've pretty much squatted since I got out of prison. It was meant to be like a temporary emergency thing because my ex-girlfriend stole like 1,500 quid that I'd saved up from doing like 80, 90 hours a week in care work before prison, knowing that I would need to get out and I would need some money. And yeah, she took it. So I had nothing when I got out, and yeah, ended up as in a kind of crisis, moving in with my mum and her new partner at the time. And like, that was really frightening for me because I didn't have a good history with her partners. So yeah, but anyway, it's fucking amazing where I live. It's paradise if you ever come and visit. So yeah, I know I'm very aware that most people don't have access to land. I didn't have gardens and stuff growing up, or not huge gardens. So yeah, I know that being able to like walk around beautiful hedgerows and stuff like isn't possible for everyone. But you know, there are lots of like awesome kind of urban herbalism projects as well, where people are foraging or doing plant identification walks in graveyards and allotments, and you know, these places that actually have huge amounts of biodiversity. So yeah, I guess my takeaway with this is just like try and learn the practical things. You know, you don't have to go to university to do that. Find other people that love plants, like in the herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress course. Like I encourage you to really think about your like herbalism journey in the sense of like finding your crew, you know, like finding the people you want to learn from, the people you want to organize with, you know, finding projects to volunteer with. And, you know, it's not just for us, right, in our learning in a kind of self-focused way, it's also for the outcomes of the project, you know, whether that's making medicine for refugees in Calais or you know, like Bristol Herbalist Without Borders supporting like refugee mothers, for example. So it's like, it's not just for you, but obviously it is a fantastic chance to learn herbalism. And one of my sort of goals for this year is to like redevelop my herb garden and have like way more people visiting the site, like a bit more informally, like to do medicine making together, not like a paid course, but like, hey, like I'm going to do some glycerites today for Calais. Can anyone come down kind of thing? Anyway, just try and get your hands in the soil, try and get practical experience. It will teach you like so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityapothecary.org/podcast.